All right, guys. So we got David Schreiber here, one of our parents of the Greeley Wrestling program. You can't really say enough about Schreiber and what he's done for us in the last 5 years. But we'll let Coach DeBellis also get on this. But I wanted to start with how I met David, and it was before I even met Matt, I believe. I was
Yes.
just starting to coach with Coach DeBellis at Greeley, and me and Schreiber were both members of Club Fit. So I would always run into him, and he would always ask about wrestling and ask about the team, and always was super interested and polite and wanted to know what was going on. And it was refreshing to have somebody that cared so much about wrestling. When we were first kind of rebuilding a program, and I knew at that point that Schreiber was going to be, an intricate part of us kind of going forward. DeBellis, you remember when you first met Schreiber?
Youth wrestling. Matthew was probably about
Third grade.
Yeah, and he was in a good group. We had about 30 kids in that program, which we had this year too, which is good.
Yeah.
Well,
Schreiber, came up very personable. This, that. You see a lot of parents come in, and but nobody has the longevity that Schreiber has had. He's part of the coaching staff, pretty much.
Well, we'll talk about that later. He actually, he is part of the coaching staff now, which is
awesome.
Things are moving. But Schreiber, maybe talk about, I'm kind of curious because I don't really know this. I never really talked to you about this, but, I remember meeting you at Club Fit and talking to you and, whatever. But at that point, I was more involved with the high school. Coach
Right.
Bellis was way more involved with the youth. Do you remember your first impressions of the program with Coach DeBellis and the youth program when you kind of got involved there?
Yeah, it's interesting. Matthew had just started, probably third grade, so that would have made him, I don't know, roughly 8, I guess, maybe 9, 7, I don't know. And Aaron Walk, one of Matthew's teammates, his parents had seen, Mike, you must have posted some ads because I think at the time you were going through the rec department for the program, and mentioned to Matthew and Aaron had played soccer together for a few years at that point. And I hadn't thought of it. I'm embarrassed to say that it wasn't something as of just the background. I guess a former wrestler, although Matthew, as I told him, had more wins in his first week, I think, as a varsity wrestler than I probably had 3 years. But it just didn't occur to me at that stage because it was fairly early. I probably didn't start wrestling till 6th or 7th grade. So we got there, and what did I know about Harsh Greeley wrestling? Absolutely nothing. And you greeted us, when we walked in. You do that with all the parents and the kids, and immediately Matthew felt comfortable enough. And fortunately, there were a lot of kids from his particular grade. A few of them stuck with it maybe for a few years, and he just took to it. Not that he was. And I said to him before I got on the interview with you guys, and by the way, I am honored to honestly be here speaking, that I said, I'm not pulling any punches. I said, I'm going to tell it like it is. I said, it may not be always the most, positive thing, but I'm going to tell the truth. So Matthew, didn't take to it right away. But the thing that I took away from the youth program is that it wasn't this intense, it was like games for the kids to get them used to it. Unlike where I was very active in our town soccer program. By 3rd grade, they had tryouts, and it was travel soccer, and this was a great way, particularly with this type of sport, and I think it would probably be useful for other individual sports, kind of get the kids in, and then as they get older, you can certainly make it more serious and more intense, and certainly have more responsibility. So that was what I remember. I mean, at this point, it was, like I said, about 10 years ago, but I still remember it pretty vividly.
I mean, that's a great way to say it. Coach DeBellis runs that youth program. I think has done a great job, and I think that's what a town youth program should be. I think if you want to, if you're a younger guy, like for example, a PJ Duke or somebody like that, was a young superstar, right, and continued to be a superstar. He kind of beat the rule there on that. If you want to do that, you go to Empire, or you train, you do your thing. But I think to get somebody into the sport and to love the sport, Coach DeBellis does it the perfect way.
And I think it depends on the kid. I agree with you completely. Yeah, it depends on.
Levels, right? You work your way through
Yeah.
it. Maybe you say, like a Kai and Jared, they're still involved with the youth program, but they go to the club too now because they've been in it for a while, and they're looking for that little bit more intense training. But I remember meeting Matt too the first time. I was student teaching at Seven Bridges.
Yes.
What was her name? That gym teacher coach.
Yeah.
Eva Burtis.
Yes. Yep. She was a great lady. Still, I'm sure she still is a great lady. But I was doing teaching with her, and Matt Matt was in one of the classes, and I knew he wrestled, but I didn't. I seen him in passing. At that time, I still wasn't very involved with youth. That was really Coach Sabellas' thing, and I remember seeing him. He was this little guy. I'm like, all right, well, it'll be 99 pounder. And we knew he was going to be. I knew his freshman year, and we'll get into this, I guess, now, but I knew he was going to be good. Maybe I didn't expect him to be as good right off the bat as he was. He came in and he was ready to go. And I don't know, Schreiber, maybe we could talk a little bit about like the progression of Matt, like from middle school to high school, maybe how his personality and that look, because I know it changes later in high school too, but like, he made a big jump, I feel like.
Yeah. It's interesting because you can apply it to Matt, and I'd like to think this same type of progression could apply to a lot of kids who are wrestling now. The interesting thing was, since he started early, there were certain things you could say thrown into the fire. So the first memory I have is it was probably in fourth grade. Some of the kids were talking about going, and Mike, you took us up there to the youth state tournament up in outside of Binghamton, and you had to qualify. So a bunch of Greeley kids, or the youth wrestling kids, went to John Jay High School, and they had a tournament. And Matthew he lost a bunch of matches, and I'm thinking, well, he's not going to qualify for states, but somehow he must have wrestled like 8 times that day, and it comes down to he wrestled another kid from Chapua, and I think he won the match. It was one of the slow. It was like 2-0 or something. Neither of them were doing much, and I find out that at the time, I guess anybody could have gone to the state wrestling tournament. So Matthew qualified, and there were several other kids who were more accomplished than Matthew. But we decided Matthew wanted to go. We thought it'd be fun. So we remember heading up to I guess it was Johnson City. And we stayed over for the whole weekend. Matthew wrestled twice for a total of a minute. Wrestled 30 seconds and got pinned. He wrestled 30 seconds and got pinned. The second match, which was actually a consolation match because he had lost in the first round, was to a kid who is now a 5-time state champion and going to Cornell. It's Greg D. But Matthew was, up against these kids. We didn't know who these kids were, but he had a, resounding losses. But he didn't care, in the sense that he was really happy, and that was fine at the time when he was 8 or 9, about going back to the hotel, getting into the pool, going out to dinner with his friends, and I think we celebrated Mike's birthday, even though it wasn't Mike's birthday. But it was just the experience of going away for the weekend and having an activity. And I'm sitting there, I joke about it later, and I say, we drove 7 hours, round trip so he could wrestle for a minute. That's what wrestling is sometimes,
But the one thing that's important to the team and to the individuals is you could have left. You could have said, okay,
right.
We wrestled our minute.
Right.
We're out of here. But that's not what it's all about. It's not all about that. It's not the wrestling. It's everything that's involved.
And it really is. Even in high school, like you said, so much of my memories of his tournaments, like we would go to SUNY Oswego for a tournament there every year at Christmas. It wasn't just the mat time. It was hanging out in the stands with the other parents. It was back at the hotel. The kids would go swimming. So there was always more to it than just the wrestling. Obviously, that's why we were there. But it was just more of an experience. And I think that's fairly unique to maybe not just wrestling, but individual sports, as you get that more of that sense of camaraderie sometimes. But to go from there, it really wasn't until 7th grade, but leading up to that, Matthew would go to some tournaments. He did not join the club, a wrestling club like Empire. He had looked at it. He had gone a few times, got comfortable, which was good because I think that's how he was able to join later. But I remember, I mentioned this to Mike the other day, I was getting a little concerned. My goal solely was for Matthew to just keep wrestling if he wanted to, just to enjoy it. Whatever happened. I really had no expectations. And I said to Mike, I think he's up to like 15 losses. How do I keep him? I don't want him to quit. And he wasn't talking about it, but I was, being the parent of an only child, I guess I was too focused on it. But he said, don't worry, he'll win occasionally. You just need one win every, 10 matches or 15 matches. And sure enough, he gets this win up at John Jay, and that probably tided him over till the next year. So at that point, and there was no pressure from any of the coaches about why are you not winning. There was just none of that. And that was the key thing, I think, for a kid like Matthew, was just to stay interested. And then, as you had said, it really wasn't. It was 7th grade and modified, where he started really making some leaps and bounds. And according to Mike, and you're right, Mike, it's a different caliber at that stage too. He was wrestling a lot of really good youth wrestlers, which I wasn't aware of. And I think that was kind of the progression going towards high school, but I still didn't know what to expect. You guys did more than I did.
No, I think we're going to get into. We'll try maybe to go through Matt's career first, and then what David's done for us outside of Matt, because he's done a lot. We'll get into like Aaron and Jacob that year when they were going to states and the wild card, and run the stats and stuff like that. But me and Schreiber have talked about this before in DeBellis, and club wrestling, right? And I think this is a good time to bring something like this up, and it just kind of shows who we are as a program and who the Schreibers are as a family, because everybody's trying to, do the right thing and do what's best for Matt. I mean, that's what's most important, right? And if I recall, I think it was like 7th or 8th grade, Matt was going to the other club, which is GPS, and no problem there. They're a respected club. But the rest of the team was training at Empire. And I found it interesting both ways, how Schreiber didn't want to step on any toes or anything of that matter, but he wasn't, right? Because all we care about is the kid. Eventually, Matt ended up choosing on his own to go to Empire. But I just want, if some of our parents watch this, some of our youth parents and even our high school parents, of course, I'd rather them be training with me, at Empire, just so I could watch them, and be around them. But I think wrestling builds so much, like we talked about in Bing Bing's interview, that if you're putting in the commitment to train off season, regardless of where you're training, it's going to be beneficial to you. And I was just happy that Matt was taking it that seriously at the time,
Yeah.
And again, in the back of my head, I was hoping like, hey, I hope he comes to us, just because I would love to see what he's doing every day. I want to see his progress, and I want to be involved in his progress. But, and he did do that. It's kind of hard not to, with Jacob and Aaron over there and him over there. But I don't know, maybe speak on Schreiber, how he, his thoughts about like maybe this taking wrestling as serious as he did. Like when he said, okay, I'm going to go club wrestle now, and this is what I'm doing,
That he had tried going up to Empire, and he would go occasionally, 5th and 6th grade. Matthew was fairly shy. And it was hard for him, I think, to decide to join, but he would go occasionally with some of the other kids, from Greeley. And I think it was probably towards the end of 7th grade, beginning of 8th grade. And I don't remember exactly what got him to join, whether we had discussions. He chose to go to GPS primarily because I think he thought at the time he would have more kids in his weight class. You got to remember also, Matthew weighed, I'd say probably in 7th grade, I'd be surprised if he was 80 pounds, to be honest. Maybe he was 80, 85 pounds 7th grade. So he was somewhat challenged in who he could wrestle. Not that there weren't people anywhere for him to wrestle, but he had this in his head. And I also think it was, he knew less kids there, so maybe he felt that was an easier thing to do. And that was his 8th grade year. And I think he got some really good training, but I think, he made the decision. I remember talking to you about it before the season started, his freshman year, to join Empire, which was Iowa Style Wrestling at the time, and John Deagle and you as the main instructor. And it just made sense. I mean, you were going to be coaching him for the next 4 years. And I think he realized that. And I think at that time also a bunch of his teammates, his classmates, I mean, like Aaron, Jacob and Nate Frere were a year ahead and a year behind him. But I think it was that combination that made that decision. And it was very seamless. I mean, I think it made sense. And as he started wrestling his 9th grade year, he got more comfortable because he also was wrestling better. And it just was a natural fit. And it helped so much because of the caliber. And this is probably true of any, and this is unique to wrestling, but true of most rooms where, you're going to have some level of competition, but I don't think there's a wrestler anywhere that isn't going to get better competition working out at a club in their area, because you're just going to be attracting kids from other schools with that same drive and personality. They want to improve and they have the same mindset.
Well, it's interesting too. I was thinking today, because actually Pete Duke called me today. So just randomly talking or whatever. And he talked about this series we're doing. He's like, oh, they're really cool. He said, so far, the only one I watched was Matt's, and I've been like nitpicking through some other ones. And he just was very complimentary of Matt. And he went back to, now if people are watching this that are wrestling fans, they know that PJ is who PJ is. He's a phenomenon, and 7th grade state champ, the #1 pound for pound middle schooler in the whole entire country. And Pete was going back to, how Matt would wrestle with PJ and help PJ when PJ was this young guy. And I think that goes to show what kind of person Matt is, but it also goes to show of like how his progression was, right? When he went into Empire as like a freshman, he was this young guy, looking up to the older guys, and he ended up falling in love with it and wanted to be involved and all that stuff. But by the time he's a senior, he's mentoring guys like PJ Duke, and now look at PJ, and Matt, I'm sure, still is checking up on PJ and what his accomplishments are and watching him wrestle, and they talk and this and that. But I think it's just really cool to see how he went from the young guy with like, deer in headlights, like here I am, here's I'm trying to think who the superstars were at that time, but you have the Matt Grippies of the world and whoever else, at the time, Grant Cuomo and Jacob and Aaron were killing it, classmates. To that guy his senior year where, if I was running 5 minutes late to practice, I'd say, hey, Matt, start him at Empire. He was that guy. So, I mean, Coach DeBellis, you could talk about maybe this too, his progression, like watching him like mature through his career was like really fun to watch, I feel like.
Yeah, when he was youth, he used to, battle, but he would come up on the losing end a lot. But then once he hit 7th and 8th grade, he was just on autopilot. And then he hit 9th grade at 99 pounds, and he had about 35 wins, I think. So if it wasn't, and we talked about this in the Aaron's interview, and those guys pushed each other, and it was kind of like a friendly rivalry. Really was with those two. It was friendly because they were like, I have 34, you have 35. It was really
going back and forth.
There was definitely support there, though.
Yeah, it was awesome, and it wasn't at all confrontational at all.
No.
And Aaron ended up having maybe 2 more wins that year. But think about it. There was 2 freshmen getting 30-plus wins.
Absolute studs.
Ridiculous.
But I said this on the last one, I think with Aaron. I don't know if I said with Aaron or with Marino, but if Matt Schreiber was on any other team, like we'd be writing, stories about him. Like he had an unbelievable career. And I don't think it gets, shadowed by Aaron's career. It doesn't, because they both were, I think we we're very happy with both their results in different ways, right? But I mean, man, like Matt had some career, two-time section champ, 2-time All-State. There's not many people in Section 1 that have those type of careers, let alone at Horace Greeley. So, Matt's a legend, and it's cool to see how he kind of like went from that shy kid to a straight up legend.
I remember one stat that, Coach, I think you said in the room when Matthew came back as a senior, he was the highest place finisher at ISW.
Yes, he was.
Is that true?
Because Aaron was in New York. Yep. We had superstars like, RJ and those guys too were great, but they were Connecticut. Matt Schreiber was the highest returning club member in New York.
Right.
And I don't want to, we already talked with Matt, so I don't want to breeze by this, but I want to get a couple Matt points out, and then I want to talk about what Schreiber does for us, because I think that's important. And I think talking about like parent sacrifice and all that stuff is important too. But, Matt, just so people that are watching this know what this guy did is, and I don't know I think you might have mentioned this to Bellis, but his senior year, he beat the section champ at 99. He beat the section champ at 113, and he beat like the section runner-up at 120 or something like that. Like he was the lightweight. He was the guy. And then if you look at his state brackets, right, almost any other year, Matt's senior year when he came in 5th, he's a state champ, I feel like, because you got guys like Steve-O, who's going to go down as a New York great. You got a guy like Ryder, who's going to go down as a New York great. Liardi and Rocco, I forgot his last name.
Camalachi.
Yeah, I knew it was like an Italian name. Like those guys are going to be 4-time, 5-time All-State wrestlers. Like, people forget that, and I don't want that to be forgotten. Like, I love Chris Crawford. He's a stud. He's an 8th grader. He's going to be great, right? Or he's a freshman, but he's going to be really, really good, Chris Crawford. This is not a knock at him whatsoever. I think that kid's going to be unbelievable. But with that being said, if Matt Schreiber was a senior a year later at this 106 bracket this year, he walks through the state tournament, let alone, wins it. He walks through it. So I think that needs to be said. And I think that needs to be understood. Like he was, the guy, and to go up a weight class and beat a section champ, a guy like Rodas, who was super physical and definitely bigger than that. He was definitely cutting weight to make 113. You couldn't beat him. He couldn't beat Matt. It wasn't going to happen, no matter what. Even if you threw him on his head out of bounds, he wasn't going to beat him. And that's just how it is. So anyway,
Yeah.
Schreiber, do you want to wrap up Matt's
Yeah.
career? And then we'll
I wanted to point something out to everyone who's listening. You talk about progression. And you can say progression on the mat. You win X number of matches this year, and you win a few more next year. You get to the section finals, you get to the states. But what, to me, and this is not just about Matthew, and this is what I just love about the sport, and I have been unable through the 10 years that I've been involved to articulate this properly. And I try, and I'm not going to give up. But the progression for any kid, whether if they put the effort in, and I'm not talking about wins, but just the change, and you talk about maturity, right? I mean, I still to this day, I listened to Matt's interview and I was really proud of him. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do for these kids, Aaron as well. It's just seeing them grow as people. And I don't remember if Mike had said this to me or I had noticed this, but Matthew, and I told him I was going to say this, when he got to high school, very quiet kid. He would walk around a little bit, kind of shoulders down. Sometimes his hands were in his sleeves. And within that year, just chest kind of opens up, and not arrogant, not cocky, just confident, quietly confident. And as you said, one of the things I'm most proud about is that progression and just being more confident and comfortable in your own skin. And I think wrestling will do that for anyone and everyone. I don't think there's an exception if the commitment is there. I don't care how much you win. I don't, that commitment to go out there by yourself and wrestle. And what you guys have done and what you guys continue to do is instill that type of approach. It doesn't happen everywhere. I've been in I've seen other wrestling rooms. I've been in other wrestling rooms. And that's the biggest takeaway for me. And that's why I keep, I've said to you guys 100 times, thank you, thank you, thank you. Not because Matt was 2-time All-State, which is still to this day, I can't believe. And not because he wasn't qualified, but it's just not something I was seeing as this was moving along. And you guys have just, like I said, you've created a man out of him. And there's so many other kids who will benefit and should benefit. It's the kids who aren't wrestling who could benefit from this, who need to listen to all of these interviews, because it's not just about winning and losing. It's just about being, as Anthony would say, the best version of yourself. And that's really what it's about.
Yeah, it is. And thinking back, I think none of this would have been possible for Matt, though. And then we said to Bing Bing, and we said to Aaron, and we'll say it to Jacob and whoever else, Scotty and whoever else we interview. But without parental support, there's been, we've been lucky in that. I feel like we've been lucky in that regard, but there's some that have went above and beyond more than others, and Schreiber being one of them, maybe being that guy. But he didn't have to trust us right off the bat, right? Like I think any parent could tell that we're good people. We're not trying to hurt their child, but I think to get that level of trust, is super important. And I remember talking to Schreiber, I heard there's other coaches, I'm not, from other programs, other schools, whatever, that will not talk to the parents, right? Like we make ourselves very available. And, I consider Schreiber a good friend now. And when Matt was going through it, we talked. I remember his junior year, we went back and forth a lot about Matt getting down to 99, but he trusted me. It wasn't like it wasn't, he knew that I had his son's best interests at heart, and he didn't give me any resistance, right? Now, there's probably times that we, I don't know if we actually ever disagreed, but there might have been times where we were kind of bouncing things off each other, which is perfectly fine, and you need that. You need that. But I just think, either of you guys could speak on, again, every interview, that buying in factor came in, and it comes from the parents, the coaches, and the wrestlers. Everybody has to be on the same page. And if they're not, it's going to be hard to improve.
One comment, and then we'll let Dave, because this is an interview with Schreiber. He has a counterpart that did just as much work.
Oh, Kathy was unbelievable. We're lucky. Yeah. Good thing you said that, Coach. We're lucky in so many ways with our parents, like Kathy with the Greeley duels and setting all that up. I don't think there's any way we could have found a better. I mean, we've been lucky the whole time, but that core group with Matt, Jacob, and Aaron, that those parents were unbelievable. What they did for this program, and they never, not that parents get in our way, but they never made us worry about the BS. We were just worried about getting their
We
kids.
got the coach.
We got to coach. We
got
were
the
worried.
coach.
We were worried about making Jacob and Aaron the best versions of themselves, like David just said, and we couldn't do that without parents supporting us.
One story about Kathy, and then when we had the Greeley duels, and she had to go away on business. She flew into Westchester and came right to the Greeley duels, put on an apron, and started working. But she organized all that stuff. So she had organized everything prior, set everything up on these Google Docs and all this stuff that, to be honest, when I first started coaching, I was doing all of that. I was doing the catering and the this and the that. And thankfully, all of that stuff came off our plate. And Dave, you were, a big part of that, saying, Mike, you guys should be coaching. You shouldn't have to worry about raising money. You shouldn't have to worry about getting sponsors. That's not your job. That's our job. Let us handle that. We'll handle that. You just handle the kids and the wrestling piece. So that was a huge help. And it was a big family effort.
No, it's amazing when you see that. And again, for me, having the wrestling background, I think, you talk about like cutting weight. I was very comfortable with what you guys were doing in that. Kathy had no wrestling in her family, and she really embraced it. That was amazing from day one. Because again, and I'm not saying this about a wife or a husband, anybody who hasn't been exposed might be a little hesitant. It does get, I remember when Matthew started wrestling, a lot of times you get these arm bars and the kids would start to cry because I thought their arms were being ripped off their shoulders, even though they weren't. And she was a real trooper and very supportive. And I saw that with, with the Ferrers and the Wolks. I don't believe, I could be wrong, but I don't believe they had wrestling experience either. And just bought in. And I think, again, it does go back to everybody knowing what they can do. So parents can, driving running the concession, for instance, and Kathy did. She literally came back from the airport directly to the school. She didn't go home first because I remember wheeling her bag in. But we love those that tournament every December, the Greeley duels, first week of December. Just starting in like September, I remember I would talk to you guys and just be looking forward to that. And it's just, those are the kind of things. It was just working the concession, running in and watching your kid wrestle. But it takes a village. And you guys set it up though in such a way that you talked about trust, right? And it was just evident the way, again, been in other rooms, I've coached, I've been coached, just made it easy to trust. And I think it's just depending on the parent, and I understand why it's hard. It's a difficult sport. There's so much going on there. There's the one-on-one, there's the weight, there's some physicality to it. But it's just a matter of trusting, and and I've said I'll talk to anybody in town, anybody anywhere, and give them my experience with it, and I would do that full time if I could. I would love that. But yeah, it is a buy-in, and it's also the parents play a large role in it, but I think the kids drive the parents to do it in the sense that they have this interest. Like Matthew has become such a student of the game. He'll follow the college scene and the Olympic trials, and there's this love. And I have that love. I mean, I probably had it much less than before Matthew got involved. So it becomes second nature after a while.
I remember, you might have had that love for a while, because I remember my first or second year coaching, you had a whole crew of youth guys that had sectionals at Pace watching us. Yes. And I thought that was really cool. I remember saying to DeVellis, I'm like, these guys are going to be good because they're over here watching us now. And I find that to be, driven people. But again, this thing's giving me 8 minutes, so I just want to make sure we get all this done. It's freaking annoying. I might have to upgrade because I feel like I could talk to Schreiber about wrestling for hours.
We'll do this again another time.
Yeah. We might bring you on as a host or something, because Schreiber's got a lot in that. Me and Schreiber still to this. I think the two really people I talk to the most about wrestling is Coach DeBellis and Coach Schreiber. Like the two guys on right now. Like I'll come up with a thought, and maybe I'll call Coach DeBellis, and he'll be busy building a birdhouse or whatever the heck he's doing, and he won't pick up. So I'll call Schreiber, and Schreiber will talk for like 20 minutes about a Michael Amatrado or an Oliver. It's not all about Matt, and I think that's what's super interesting, not interesting, but great about Schreiber and our parents. I know for a fact that Wendy Ferrer has been watching all of these. Yes. I'm sure Steve Walk is watching them and excited. And I can't wait to get those two on here as well. And but I wanted to talk about one thing real quick before we forget, and we don't run out of time. Is we could talk about Matt and how he grew and how David Schreiber bought in and helped us and, was there for us. And those long car rides, all these parents have to do a lot of stuff. Those car rides to Oswego, Ute State, all of that stuff, helping them with their diets if they're watching their weights. And there's a lot that goes into it, driving them to Empire or, whatever. I think in that journey, you meet a lot of people and make a lot of friends. I think Schreiber's made a lot of friends through wrestling. Who you wouldn't have otherwise. And same for me as an athlete, right? I made a lot of friends through wrestling that I wouldn't have otherwise. But, funny thing about David not only worrying about Matt is the year Matt took fourth in the section, Aaron and Jacob both took second. Now, Matt actually wasn't that far off a wild card because there was 3 studs in front of him, but he didn't make the cut. It seemed as if Jacob and Aaron did, and, because they were second. And David was instrumental on catching a mistake that another program made. And being that he caught that mistake, I'm pretty sure that's what helped us make sure that Jacob Ferreira got the States that year. And that, to me, that's crazy. That shows what kind of support we have.
I would like to speak on that for a second because I went through that roller coaster.
Oh my God.
Wendy and all of that. Yeah. Because we got an announcement that Jacob had made it to States as a wild card. And I called Wendy and said, congratulations, Jacob. Woo! Let's go. 5 minutes later, Jamie Block emailed me and said, you didn't tell anybody about that because it was a mistake. So it went back and forth. And then David figured out that 5 points was awarded to a Fairport kid that was actually a cousin
big time
of the kid that should have got it. They gave him 5 extra points. And it finally came back, and David was the hero.
That was crazy. With the fact that it was all done, and it still is, manually.
Was it McKenna?
Oh, gosh. I can't remember. I thought it was a kid from Farmington or Farmingdale, maybe.
Yeah, he had a brother.
Yeah. Simons, maybe?
Simmons? Yes, Simons? You're good, Schreiber. You got a good memory. Yes.
It wasn't Fairport?
I don't think so. I got to look that up. I thought it was Farmingdale.
Fairport was Aaron's weight, the kid that was good from Fairport.
Parker?
Let me tell you, that was an interesting year in the sense that, you had that was the first time, at least in my generation, since Matthew was a freshman, that you had kids qualify for States. And we got a good group come up. We went up and watched, and that was the beginning. That was the beginning.
And they both lost barn burners in the placing round.
But it was good experience that they needed. And if Schreiber wasn't on top of that, Jacob might not have got that experience at the state tournament. And who knows if he would have made that same run the next year. Who knows if he would have had the gumption to get that win in the semis with 1 second left. If he didn't have that experience of, like, the crowd and people being there. Like, that might have played a bigger role than we even think. You don't know. You have no idea,
Having that experience is great. And I think even when Matt went up there sophomore year to watch them that year, I think that was a big thing for him in the sense that he wanted to be there.
I think he changed in that moment, and he was already a good wrestler. Because, like I said before, those 3 guys I finished ahead of him at 99 that year were very good. That was a deep weight class. Dennis Rodman just took third in the state at 152 this year. He was ahead of him. But I remember talking to Matt, like, in between matches and in between sessions, and he was telling me who was on each mat. I was like, Matt, why don't you worry about you being all over? But I really think that clicked for him because he trained hard that offseason, and not only did he get there, he took 4th in the state the next year. So, obviously he did the right thing. But I also want to, because, it says 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Yep. Last time it went quicker on me, so I just got to be careful. I want to, we're lucky, like I said before, in the sense with parents and the support. The Amatrados right now are picking up a lot of slack. They're doing a great job, with the dinner and sending emails out to the parents and getting people on committees of, like, Greeley duels or whatever it is. But Schreiber, transcend all of that. And that's not knocking anybody. Everybody else is being pretty much normal where David Schreiber was not normal. He went above and beyond. And so do they, but it's just different. I still talk to Schreiber about stats. I still, we'll be wrestling Ossining, and Schreiber and me will talk the night before or whoever it is, right? And he'll know, who beat who and, what was the score? And I'm pretty good at that stuff too, but he checks me to make sure I have my stuff right. I make sure he has his stuff right. And we're very in tune on that. But I feel like with anybody, they give the sport a chance, right? And especially in our program, there's a couple other, John Jay, Coach Shortfinger, we'll get him on eventually, does a great job. They build a family atmosphere. and the love for the sport. But if you give this program a chance and the sport a chance, you're gonna love it. Like, you're gonna want to be involved with it. Like, I talk to Wendy Ferreira regularly still, about Jacob at NC State. I talk to David Schreiber regularly. I talk to Steve maybe not as much, but often. So I think that needs to be driven home. It's important, and I think the parents are key and instrumental for our success. So.
Yeah, it's interesting though. This year is a big transition for me because I wanted to stay involved, and Matt was off obviously at Binghamton. And it's funny, I started, working on what I would normally do, which is statistics and helping set up for tournaments and seedings and things like that. And I remember and I would try to come to as many matches as I could, and I went to a bunch of tournaments. But I remember being at counties, and Isabella was wrestling, and she just had one of what ended up being, I think, 4 or 5 exciting, just unbelievably exciting matches over like 3 weeks. And I was on that mat just screaming as a fan. And at the end of the day, I lost my voice. And I was just thinking about it from the transition. I cared just as much, and I wanted every one of those kids on this team this year to succeed just as much as Matt. And I think we have less than a minute. That may sound corny and sappy, but it's all true. And I love it. I mean, it's, sitting around talking about who's going to be seated here and there. And I thought, it's going to be different maybe if Matt's not here. It just wasn't. And that's a testament to you guys as well. You made me feel very welcome, and I appreciate it.
Schreiber, you're the best. I want to get you on again because there's so much to talk about. Maybe we'll get you in a co-host kind of way or something, because we could talk more about you as that guy. But it's going to run out, so I'm going to stop recording right now. I appreciate you coming on. We'll stay on for a second if we can. Okay?